for another My Week With video. And this week, I've been driving the 2022 Subaru BRZ. And man, this has been one of the videos I've been most looking forward to making. You know, I was very impressed with the new BRZ whenever I reviewed it last summer. So I've been anxiously awaiting having one of these for a week to live with the BRZ for a week. And so, full disclosure, I did own the previous generation BRZ for about 2 years, put like 33,000 miles on it over 2 years, and loved that thing. But it wasn't love at first sight with that BRZ originally. If you're a longtime follower, you'll know that I really wish that they had more power, and that was the big thing they fixed here with the 2022, and it really has perfected this car. It's just enough power. It's not too much. It's this real magical Goldilocks effect of you have enough power that you feel like you have plenty of punch, plenty of merging power, and you have a good amount of torque, because not only do you have more torque, 184 pound-feet now, which is about 35 or so more than before, but you also have it coming on like 2,500 RPM sooner. There's no torque dip anymore, at least as far as I can feel, but it still isn't too much power or anything, so it really is the perfect sweet spot for a fun sports car on the streets, I think. And that's why, I mean, I love this thing, and I loved living with it for a week and daily driving it. So, I mean, I desperately just wish that I could find a way to justify having a second rear-wheel drive manual two-door sports car, because if I could justify it, I would own one of these. That's how much I love this thing. There are a few funny things that were, you know, like that's radically different from the previous car, but like some things have still stuck around from the previous generation, in my opinion, like this shifter. So this shifter feels very similar to the old car, and it is the same gearbox essentially, although they did make a few little refinements. It's running a new gear oil, so that they say it actually has smoother shifts whenever it's cold. Interestingly though, I've noticed it still is stiff when cold. That was one of the minor little nitpicks here that I'm going to make here about the new BRZ, is that like first gear, it really does not want to go into first gear whenever the engine isn't warmed up fully yet. And you know, that's something that isn't unique to this car. There's other manuals that, you know, don't love that either, but it's just kind of funny. They tried to fix it, and I feel like it still isn't great. It's, you know, not a big deal whatsoever, but just one funny little thing that jumped out at me. Another funny little thing that jumped out at me is something I kind of picked up on a little bit in the review video whenever I first, you know, got to sample this car, and now it kind of has become more and more apparent to me, and that is that it's a little tricky on the limit. So I've noticed there's actually one time at night when it was a little bit colder, I was in the high 30s, and this is running the summer tires on it, where it actually stepped out on me, and I was provoking it, and I was expecting it to be very natural, and instead it kind of had a little bit of a snap oversteer kind of thing, where it actually got away from me for a split second there. And if you watch my BRZ review, you'll notice that I said in that how it had a little bit of that on track, and on the street here I was able to actually provoke that as well, whereas the GR86, whenever I reviewed it, you know, on street and on the track, that was a little bit more progressive and a little bit easier to manage at that limit. And so I wasn't really expecting to find that here on the streets as well, but I've noticed that is still the case. Now, it still is playful. It still loves wagging the tail, and I'm kind of impressed that even with the Pilot Sport 4 tires, I thought they'd kind of kill the fun a little bit here on the streets. Not the case at all. It still plays around at me, because they're still only 215 wide, so even though they are stickier 215 wide tires, they're still only 215s, so that certainly is going to help you out. But speaking of the handling, we're coming up some corners here I always take. Roads are a little bit damp here today, but we're gonna go around these corners and see how it does here. So it still has tons of grip. Obviously, I mean, these are still super light, you know, well under 3,000 pounds, and just give you such a light feeling, because even other cars that are under 3,000 pounds, like a Honda Civic Si, for example, you know, you sit up higher in those, it's a bigger car. This being a purpose-built sports car, really, you can't even compare it to all the hot hatches and other sporty compacts out there, because this is a true sports car platform, a true sports car in its design. It's smaller, it's, you know, just going to be more nimble because of its lower center of gravity and stuff, and it just feels so good that it's head and shoulders above all the others as far as handling. Now, as far as lateral grip, if you want to try and quantify it, yes, handling might be very similar to some other stuff out there that this competes with, but you know, whenever you factor in just the way it feels from the seat of your pants, it's uncomparable really, and just feels so good. The nice light steering that's also really quick, 2.5 turns lock to lock. I mean, mean, just this whole car, just, it's so much fun. I mean, yes, clearly I'm in the camp of, you know, BRZ fans, and, you know, I loved my car that I had, you know, for 2 years previously. But even if, you know, taking off that hat and putting on my car reviewer objective hat, it still is just incomparable, you know, for the money. I think that, you know, it feels punchier than the Miata, and it also, you know, I think has a little more grip than the Miata. I feel a little more confident in this than the Miata as far as if I'm really trying to push it and stuff. The Miata is kind of engineered to even have slightly lower limits, but that is also magical fun. I mean, that thing is glorious with that engine in the ND2 especially, that I absolutely loved and praised that nonstop. But I mean, these two are really unrivaled otherwise, you know, in the car world these days. And so it handles really well. But one other thing I want to add about handling is that during my week, it was kind of a hit or miss experience as far as the ESC system. So when I leave everything in normal mode, there's sometimes where it'll let me hang the tail a little bit more so that I'm able to have a little bit of fun. But there's 1 or 2 times where it was kind of a buzzkill and cut in a little too early. Now there is the track mode here, which does loosen things up, but that loosens things up a lot. Like, I mean, that's when I had the snap over steer event where it was a little bit too unruly, and it almost feels like it just turns everything off. I know it doesn't, but you know, and whenever I tested that out on the autocross course and stuff, I mean, it, you know, it does still intervene a little bit, but it's really heavily reduced. And so I kind of wish there was a middle ground. The automatics do have a sport mode, which I really enjoyed when I was autocrossing that last year. I wish there was a sport mode here in the manual as well, though, because I think having that level of ESC intervention would be really nice. You know, maybe a little improvement they could easily make down the road for the manuals here. Much prefer how this engine sounds now, and I know a little bit of it's helped out with the speakers, but man, this engine sounds so much better. So you're getting a better oral experience as you're also getting you know, more power, and it just I love this thing. Every single time I hop in this and drive it, it's just an absolute blast. But anyway, a couple of little nitpicky things here, but other little things to mention here. First off, the headlights, so they're pretty good. That was one thing obviously I wasn't able to test out on the review because I only drove it during the day, and so having the chance to drive this here at night, the headlights are really good. So the limiteds here, and also, you know, the top trim, the premiums on the GR86 have these LED headlights that swivel, and so I was able to test out that swiveling feature, and it's kind of hyperactive. It really swivels a lot with just a little bit of turning input, so it's kind of an interesting way that they integrated that. The headlights also are pretty well done, but they do have a few little like dark spots where it's not a completely perfectly even beam of light. Again, very nitpicky, who really cares, but just wanted to throw that in since I was able to actually experience this at night. Another thing that's a minor little problem is the visibility. Visibility, I think actually got a slight bit worse compared to the previous generation, mainly because of these side mirrors. I think they made these side mirrors bigger. I could be wrong. It's been a little while since I've driven the previous generation car, but these mirrors are like angled upward a little bit, and they just kind of got in my way a lot. So that when I was looking through some intersections, sometimes they would just be in the right position, so I'm trying to look out into the intersection, and yet these mirrors are getting in my way, so I can't see out into the intersection. Again, totally not a big deal, a very minor thing, but you know, just one of the little things I wanted to point out here. Other things, so you might actually hear this seatbelt squeaks, and that's another carryover from the previous generation. I remember my old BRZ having a squeaky seatbelt, and so it's, you know, right by the clicking part here where that you know, little plastic piece or whatever that holds this on squeaks just like it did on my old car. It's kind of funny how some of that stuff hasn't changed, and so makes this feel a little bit more familiar in some quirky ways. But anyway, so one little thing there. Another thing that I really like, though, are these seats. So these seats are still nice and comfortable, and they're a lot more comfortable, I think, than the previous generation, which felt a little bit firmer, I think. I also love that the Alcantara here is now perforated. They're also really supportive. They grip you really well, but they're not insane with the bolstering, so it doesn't feel like you're, you know, sitting in some you know, roller coaster seat or something, you know, like you feel like when you hop in a Civic Type R, for example, or something. You know, these have bolstering and hold you in without, you know, going overboard, and so I just like that kind of Goldilocks approach to that as well. But I mean, you know, these corners, by the way, that I always take on all my reviews, you know, in most other vehicles, they're a challenge, and it really tests the car. But in this, it does it so effortlessly. It's like it doesn't even like care that there's a corner there. It's just like crazy how effortless this thing goes around corners. But it still is so much fun, even though there is less effort there. It's just really impressive. And there are multiple times throughout the week here where I was just like shaking my head and grinning, as like being so impressed by the way this thing drives. And it not only just the handling and the power, but just the way that all the inputs in the BRZ have been set up. It's just very just user-friendly. The clutch is the right weight. It's not super light, but it's also not too heavy. It just feels natural and organic. There's no weird catch point. It's not tricky to be smooth with, really. The shifter is very well defined with the gates. Never miss a shift or anything like that. All those things they do so well. Like I said, the steering, everything. They really did this car perfectly. They really refined it in all the right ways. Just very, very well done. Now, one other little thing I do want to mention, another stupid little nitpick, is the stereo system in this vehicle. That is one thing that I was a little bit disappointed by. So the Limiteds here have this 8-speaker stereo upgrade, and usually you get 6. And so I was hoping that, it would sound a little bit better, because, the stereo in my old BRZ was not good. Unfortunately, this one is still not that great. Now, it's not horrible. It's still 8 speakers, and it's a modern, infotainment system and stuff, but I just found that the bass was really buzzy. It wasn't very punchy with its sound. Again, not the priority of this car, not a big deal, but, just if you're someone who's like, oh, maybe I'll go for the Limited because I get 2 extra speakers, I wouldn't hold your breath for a great experience as far as the stereo goes. So, if that's something that's keeping you on the fence, maybe go for a base model. I don't think you're going to really, appreciate the 2 extra speakers that much. I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't tested the base stereo, but, just one little extra bit of info I wanted to toss out there. Also, this infotainment system, it's the same as other Subarus, and I don't like the way that it runs Bluetooth audio, because, everything else works fine. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although it's not wireless like it is in the Civic Si and some of the other competitors to this vehicle. But it has, a fine infotainment system. But my one thing is that whenever you're listening to Bluetooth audio, it's one of the vehicles, and GM vehicles and a few others do this, where it insists on auto playing. No matter what, you get in the car, and even if you haven't listened to the radio in 5 days or whatever, if you have it set on that Bluetooth audio for your media selection, it's going to auto play and go through a playlist. So if you're someone who wants to, keep at your playlist or at your podcast, wherever you've stopped, this is going to start auto playing. And so every time I got in the car, I had to make sure I hurried up and paused the song so it didn't start playing, or start playing a podcast or something, because it just wants to auto play that stuff constantly. So the fix around that is just to leave it on the radio setting instead, and then I don't think it'll auto play whatever's on your phone still. But I dove through the settings even to see if there's a way to disable that, and there isn't. Like, it forces you, like, you get in this car, you must listen to your song. Like, it doesn't even give you a choice to hit the play button. So just a little bit of a minor annoyance. But again, this car is so good that all these dumb little complaints that I have are things that certainly would not be deal breakers. They're very minor annoyances that are well worth putting up with, for the amazing experience here of the BRZ. It's also great on the highway. That's one thing. I wasn't able to test it out on the highway during my normal review, and so I was able to get a good amount of highway time here in this and see what it's like. And thankfully, it's not too noisy out on the highway still. The gearing isn't too bad, because the gears are pretty short here, and that really adds a lot of fun around town. But I was worried on the highway maybe it'd be a little buzzy or something. It's not. Thankfully, 6th gear is, again, this perfect sweet spot where they made it so that it has great passing power, by the way. 6th gear, I'm able to actually stay in 6th for a lot of passes, which previously, forget about ever doing that in the previous generation. You had to, downshift to 5th or 4th or 3rd if you really wanted to be in a hurry to do a pass on the highway. But with this, you have good punch there to make a good pass in 6th still, but yet, it's not screaming at some super high RPMs whenever you're cruising on the highway. So really nice with that. One other little thing that adds to some long distance comfort is an armrest, which you didn't have in the previous BRZ, at least from the factory. There was no armrest. So having an armrest is one thing I've really appreciated here, and it's been really nice to be like, hey, now I have somewhere to put my arm whenever I'm driving a BRZ. That's nice. So a minor thing, but it's so well integrated there that the way they have it set up, obviously you do lose your cup holders if you want to use it, so maybe not great for road trips, but you still do have these nice bottle holders in the doors so that you can still have a beverage in this vehicle and use the armrest, you know, if you want. The last little thing I want to mention, though, is my fuel economy here that I got over the week, and the pricing and how they've changed the pricing here for 2023 coming up. So, first off, fuel economy, I'm really impressed. These are only rated at 20 mpg in the city, 27 on the highway, and 22 combined. There's a little slide. So anyway, but in my driving, which again, I did a little more highway driving than I usually do in my press vehicle loan weeks, but it wasn't a ton of highway driving still, nothing long, because I've only put 82 miles in this car, unfortunately, because I didn't have as much time to drive it as I would have liked, because I had to split my time with this and a Elantra N, actually, which I'll mention towards the end of this video. But anyway, my fuel economy was 24 mpg, 24.3 to be exact. So I am overperforming both the city and the combined numbers, and that's not something I usually get. Usually whenever I do these you know, reviews here with a vehicle for a week, I usually end up getting 1 to 2 mpg less than the city. So I was expecting to get, you know, 18, 19, maybe 20 mpg if I was lucky. To be getting 24 here when I've been enjoying the power too. It's not like I've been driving this thing like a grandma. I mean, I've been ripping around this thing, and it's still getting 24 miles to the gallon, which, especially these days with fuel prices being what they are, another real feather in the cap of the BRZ here, and another reason why, you know, it really is the just wonderful economical sports car that's not going to break the bank in multiple ways, obviously with its price tag and with the fuel economy here and how it's, you know, going to sip gas. But the last thing I do want to mention here is the pricing of the BRZ. So, you know, they started under $30,000, including destination, and this one, as tested, being a 2022 limited with the manual, this one is like $31,500. I think it's like $31,455. So BRZs are all sold out for 2022. So unless you can find one of the rare ones on a dealer lot, and you're either willing to pay a markup, or you found one of the rare dealers that's actually cool and not charging markups, you know, you can. That's the pricing where it's going to land is, you know, just under 30 there to start, and 31.5 for this. It's worth every penny. It's not even a debate in my mind. You know, if you want a fun sports car, and, you know, you're okay with something that doesn't do a sub 5 seconds 0 to 60, you know, I think that this is going to be just amazing and such a blast, as long as you don't need, you know, a huge back seat or a big trunk or anything like that. You know, all of its competitors, really, aside from the Miata, have better practicality. So as long as you're okay taking that sacrifice, 100% I would go for it. Now, for 2023, they are increasing the price. So for those of you looking to place an order here, since that's going to be what most people watching this video will most likely be doing, is placing an order for 2023. They are about $625 more expensive than the 2022s. So that still means the base model with destination will be under $30,000. It's still like $29,650 or something like that. And then limited like this is going to be about $32,115, I believe. So, you know, now you're a little over 32, just barely. Still worth every penny. You know, I would only question the value of this car, you know, once you were getting up over, you know, like 34 or 35, then I'd be like, maybe it's a little pricey. But at these prices, I still think it's a phenomenal bargain, even with a $600 price increase, which is mostly because of inflation. So, I mean, it's kind of a relative thing. It's not like, you know, everything's, you know, roughly more expensive as well. So it's not like it's just on the BRZ here. And so I think, you know, matching inflation is okay in my book, and it's still worth every penny, I think, as far as that goes. And, so yeah, I mean, the last thing that I do want to mention very briefly is, you know, I did have an Elantra N this week as well, and I'm not doing a full-blown comparison because they are polar opposites. Polar opposite in driving dynamics, polar opposite as far as their missions, what they're going for in many ways, you know, just how they deliver that fun. They're very fun, but, you know, it's just apples and oranges to compare, honestly. But what I can say about the two, and this could again be my personal bias, so take this with a grain of salt, but I was way more excited every time I hopped in this versus the Elantra. And if you put a gun to my head and said to pick one key or the other, I would pick this over the Elantra N. Obviously, I'm probably sentimental for my old BRZ, except, well, I will admit I am definitely sentimental for my old BRZ. But, oh, that Elantra N does not rev to 7,400 like this does, and does not handle like this. It has lots of grip, it's very impressive, but it is not a true sports car. I mean, it's a front-wheel drive compact sedan that, you know, has been souped up very impressively, so stay tuned for my week with video on that car. But this is a whole other beast, and it's just so much fun. And yes, I wish I could find a way to justify buying one of these, honestly. It's the one car that is so good that even though it's like, you know, actually less than half a horsepower of my Mustang Bullet that I have, This car really got me close to getting rid of my Bullet. I mean, I'm keeping that car forever, and that's the plan. That's always been the plan. But I really was like heavily debating swapping it for one of these because I love this car that much. And if that's the biggest endorsement I can give it. If the Bullet didn't exist, this is what I would be driving, hands down, without a question, without a thought in my mind. Just 100%, you know, this would be it. It's just a perfect sports car in my opinion. Yes, there's the minor little quirks and annoyances. I don't care, 100%. I would throw my money down for one of these things in a heartbeat. So, anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2022 BRZ. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, stay tuned. I am going to be having a GR86 for a week here very soon. So stay tuned for that video. I'll be talking more about, you know, how this compares to that in my week with, you know, one of those, and how that feels out on the street a little bit more. And as far as which one of these two I would go for, because you know, the BRZ is great, and I love, you know, the sentimental, you know, aspect of being able to get World Rally Blue and having the BRZ name like my old one. But the GR86 I really enjoyed. I think a little bit more on track, at least, whenever I had one of those. And so I'll be very curious to see if that same sentiment holds up here whenever I do, you know, have it here on the street. But yeah, so thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.